Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you'll be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. If you've been inspired by the guests that we've had on the podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, hit notification bells, whatever you can do on the platforms that you're listening on, so that more people have the opportunity of hearing these and engaging in our community. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne. Our guest today is Jonathan Miles. Now Jonathan, for people that don't know who you are, could you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, I'm an American, last 30 plus years working in Israel, based in Jerusalem. And the Lord seems to have given us a calling to help connect the wonderful hospitals and doctors in Israel with the people around the Middle East, who many of them are living in places without advanced hospitals, living in places where life is devalued, where nobody cares about the life of their child. And then to be able to say, the one country that's willing to do something is the one you've been taught is your enemy, the people of Israel. And to bring those kids, we bring them for heart surgeries to a couple of the big medical centers in Israel, and to see the way they are embraced and respected, that each life is treated as created in the image of God, is mind-blowing for our neighbors and so joy-giving for us and for the Israeli people. My feeling is this connects somehow with their first covenant. I will bless you and make you a blessing to all the families of the earth. Even today, even if among the majority of our doctors probably are not believers in the scriptures, but something in their DNA really lights up when you give them the chance to do this. So it started almost 30 years ago and haven't been able to stop yet, because it's been such a blessing to see.
Mm. And for people that listen to this, they really like the work that you're doing. I know we were talking before we started recording. You said sometimes you have people come out and help and volunteer. And where could people find out more about what you do?
So probably our website is the easiest access point. And so our community is called Shevet Achim. Many of you will recognize that's Psalm 133. Behold, how good and pleasant when brothers live together in unity. And so we're giving the people of Israel that opportunity to see their Muslim neighbors as brothers. And then we volunteers from the nations are coming, and we're seeking to live this and model it ourselves. We're living in community, sharing meals, having everything in common. We're all living to the same level. And so our website is simply shevet.org. It's SHEVET.org.
Okay, and I'll get that website. I'll put it in the description box. So for anyone listening or watching this, it's there ready for you to go and check out. Jonathan, you said you've been there for about 30 years. What's some of your background? Where did you grow up in the US? And then how did you end up heading out to Israel?
Yeah, I grew up initially in Colorado and later upstate New York, and strong believing family, kind of a nice balance between conservative, biblically speaking, but touched by the charismatic movement back in the 70s. So, expecting God hears our prayers and might show up and answer them. And, so good background, but as I entered my teens, the church at that time, for me, it wasn't a place where one could openly deal with sin issues. And so, of course, I had issues of lust. I was exposed to pornography. And I really felt I had no option but to, could keep that hidden and to sort of live in some shame as I would struggle and fail and struggle and fail. And I think the Holy Spirit convicted me on multiple occasions. Go talk to your friend, go talk to your parents. But I never felt the liberty to do that. Which is such a crippling thing for the church. If the church isn't the place we can be real with each other. So things sort of went from bad to worse. I finished university. I was married. went into journalism, local television journalism, and I had some vague ideas of bringing righteousness through exposing truth, and probably mostly I just wanted to see myself on television. And but it finally came to the point in mid-20s. My heart is getting colder and colder to the Lord. I'm less and less used to anybody in this world. But finally, I came to this juncture, and I knew enough to pray, Lord, I'd like my life to mean something for you. And that prayer changed everything. The immediate response that I felt in my spirit was, okay, if you want that, go confess all of your hidden sin to your wife.
Ooh.
Wow. That's the one thing I'd never been able to do with anybody. But praise God, and this is his work. It's not ours. He gave me the grace and the faith to do that. And my wife gave me the grace to forgive me. And we were both baptized. And I said, okay, I want to go serve the Lord. What do I do next? I guess I better go study the Bible. So where do I go study? And somebody named a seminary out on the West Coast. And we packed up the U-Haul and went across the country, and I started studying the Bible. And that's what really put me on the path to the Middle East, because I really, for the first time in my life, was getting into the Hebrew prophets, and I was kind of stunned again, in the sense, what the prophets are describing is what God is showing up and doing in our generation. This is amazing. And I'd never realized so much of how the whole story of salvation is founded and centered upon, from beginning to end, the people of Israel, and how much we had entered into their story, and how dramatically God was working in their lives today. And one of my classmates there was a Messianic believer from several generations, and he helped open my eyes as well. God's Spirit is moving upon the Jewish people. So first chance I could get, I wanted to go visit. I did, and as I mentioned, I felt like a complete outsider. I went from congregation to congregation, visited some ministries, but what can I do here? I have no special connection or qualification other than my faith in the Messiah of Israel. But one night again in prayer, I just prayed, Lord, is there something in here for me? Why do I feel so, my spirit quickened when I look at what you're doing here? And again, I felt a clear, very powerful response somehow in my spirit, and it was 3 words, will you come? And my heart leapt at that, and called my wife, and she agreed. Called and quit my job, and next night I came up here to Jerusalem, and reality started to set in. I was sitting looking over the old city and the Mount of Olives, and thinking, wait, what are you doing? You have no money, no one's sending you, you have no visa, no home, nowhere to work. Your wife's about to have your 4th baby in about a month, so all the reality set in, the fear rushed in, and thank God the words Jesus came in as well and saved me in that moment. And they were, of course, the simple words: seek first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and your Father in heaven knows what you need. He will take care of these things. And he gave just enough simple faith to say, all right, if you're calling me, I'm going to trust you. I have no idea what we're doing or what's going to happen or why we're even coming, but we'll come. And that's how we got here.
So what job did you have that you quit?
When I went to, first I was a journalist until I left and went to study the Bible. After 2 years of that study, I had taken a job as a teacher of religion in a Lutheran high school in New York City. So,
okay,
hundreds of kids, maybe you could count the number of believers in that school on one hand. So it was a great mission field, and I really loved the kids. So it was hard to leave, but felt that's what the Lord was saying.
Mm.
So there you are. You're answering the call and said, yes, I will come. Do take us on the next step. What happened next?
So I went back to pack up my family, and then Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. This is the summer of 1990, and it became pretty clear that war was on the horizon and that Israel was going to be a target. And so again, that it helped so much that the Lord had spoken clearly to me. So we came. We came through that war. That was the Scud missiles, you remember, landing all over Israel. Our little baby was born a couple weeks after we arrived, and they were giving out not only gas masks but a special gas tent for babies. so we came through all that. Wasn't easy.
Did you come as a visitor? Did you come as a tourist? How did you enter the country at that point?
God provides, because while I had no qualifications for this, while I was on my first visit, I came across a story of an American doctor who was helping some kids go to the U.S. for medical care, and this was in Bethany on the Mount of Olives, and I was there to visit Lazarus's tomb. And as I was walking away, I said to myself, "Yeah, that's a Reader's Digest kind of story." And I stopped and said, "It really is a Reader's Digest story." I turned around, went back, wrote down some notes. When I got back to the States, I sent a blind letter off to Reader's Digest, and incredibly, they wrote back and gave me a contract to come and write this story for them to come back to Israel. So the story was never published, but for the next 5 years, in the eyes of the Israeli government, I was the Reader's Digest correspondent in Israel.
Wow.
Wow, that's wild.
That is wild.
And so you had no medical background professionally.
No.
Your education, did you study anything to do with medical?
Not at all. In fact, I stayed as far away from hospitals and doctors as I could. And had as many home births as my wife would allow us, and such. So
She had the same kind of attitude to hospitals as most people. We don't want to go.
yeah, I don't no interest in medical ministry at all.
So how was it, through seeing about this guy and sort of going with Reader's Digest to write this article about this person? Was that kind of the door that moved you towards the medical scene, or how did you jump into that section?
In hindsight, maybe it prepared the way. I didn't make that connection at the time. When we landed in Israel, I studied Hebrew for a few months in one of the ulpans where you can intensively learn the language. And I read one morning, this was right when the Soviet Union had mysteriously and suddenly collapsed, and the Jews were free at last, and hundreds of thousands were flooding into Israel. I read one morning, hey, some Christian friends of Israel have opened a center in Jerusalem to help these people who were arriving absolutely penniless with nothing. So I wandered in there and see what's happening, and of course got drawn right into helping, and ended up for several years. And this was right where my heart was. I was very focused on God's restoring the people of Israel. He's regathering them according to the prophets. He's made beautiful promises to them. We're to comfort them and encourage them. We're to acknowledge our debt that they have given us everything precious to us, the Word of God and the Messiah. And so I'm very happily doing that. And their hearts are really touched by what's happening. Remember the babushkas weeping and saying, "We always thought the whole world hated us. Nobody cared about us." And to be able to say, yes, followers of Jesus, we are your brothers and sisters, and we love you, and God has a good future for you. It was just I loved doing that. So I wasn't thinking of anything else until one morning a Ukrainian woman came in with her 13-year-old son, Andre. And they weren't immigrants, they weren't Jewish, but they had somehow come into Israel trying to save his life. He had leukemia and needed a bone marrow transplant. So the mother sat across from me and said, "My son's dying, they can help him, but they want $64,000 in Hadassah Hospital, and we don't have any money. Can you help us?" So it's another impossible thing to contemplate. I mean, she was one of dozens of families waiting in line to talk to me that morning, and we were giving each one a couple $100 grant to buy furniture or medical textbooks or dental care. And so I didn't know how to politely send her away. So I said, let me go down to the hospital and I'll talk to the doctors and come back tomorrow. I think I probably had the idea a lot of stories aren't really true, and if I go to the hospital, I'll find out it isn't as bad as she's saying. So I got to Hadassah that afternoon and found the professor who ran the bone marrow program, and he said, to my chagrin, it's all true. This boy will die in 2 months. I think we can save him. But I have to tell you one thing, that boy could be dying in the doorway of our emergency room, and we won't let him through the door until the last dollar has been paid. Not that we like it that way, but you need to understand the reality. This is very expensive treatment, and if we threw open the doors, the whole world would be on our doorstep. So God bless the people of Israel for the way they speak the unvarnished truth to you sometimes, because I was kind of shocked. We Americans, we would have said, oh, maybe, possibly, let's see. No, he just said, he said the reality. And I needed to hear that because I had to ask myself some hard questions. Is that really the way the world is? That we have medical care that could save this beautiful boy and we will withhold it from him? He's right here in front of us because of his background. And the words of Jesus have been working on me in small ways. Give to the one who asks from you, don't turn him away. And so I'd been learning that with the last $50 in my billfold and somebody asking me for help. But now here was a big ask and what to do. But because of the word of God, the next morning, the mother came back in and I was able to say, look, I don't know how we can help you, but let's pray. Let's share the story. Let's see what God can do. I would just offer that testimony to every one of us when we're confronted with these impossible situations. Instead of just closing the door ourselves because we don't see how it could ever happen, let's can at least pray and open the door and say, let's see what God can do. It's on him. It's not on us. And it was beautiful. Within a month, something about saving an innocent child's life unites people from all kinds of backgrounds. Would never agree on anything, but they can agree that boy deserves to live. And it was, mostly religious, Zionist, Jewish women who joined with us. And they said the same thing. How could you leave that boy to die? And actually, they were from the Vitso organization and had connections. They basically ran the Hadassah hospital. So they got on the case of the director and said, how could you've got to help that boy. You've got to lower your costs. And so donations were coming in. An important piece of that, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, give whatever little bit you have and the Lord will multiply that. Just give what you have. And so we trusted God with that. These partnerships were forming. Within a month, the boy is accepted for treatment. He comes and lives with us. He puts his trust in God going into this whole thing. And he gets, most of all, the message, your life is as valuable as anybody else. What a healing message that is. Whether a child lives or dies, if a family knows that they've been treated like they mattered, it's such a balm for the heart, I think. And that's how it started. And pretty quickly, we realized there's so much potential in these big medical centers in Israel when people are dying in the countries around us. Number 2, the hospitals are willing to become a partner and lower the costs. And number 3, this is an opportunity to live out obedience to the Word of God together with the Jewish people in a partnership, and to help them become a blessing to their neighbors. So it was. I realized at that point, this is something we ought to continue with. It wasn't a one-off. Some other families heard about this and approached us, and then finally some women who were volunteering with me started going into the Gaza Strip, of all places. And for me, as a great lover of Israel, that's the last place I was interested in going. And I had all kinds of stereotypes of how dangerous and unwanted that kind of visit would be. But they came out and said it was incredible. People were so grateful that anyone had come and spiritually open. And they finally shamed me after at least one aborted attempt into going into the Gaza Strip. And I was blown away as well, because I realized virtually every person I was talking to had never spoken to a follower of Jesus in their lifetime. There's an unreached people group right on the doorstep of Jerusalem. And so that helped to shift my view of what's going on in the Middle East, because I was all Israel-centered. God's restoring, and it's going to be the redemption of the world. Yes. But I probably was falling for the temptation, and all these enemies of Israel, they're obstacles to God's plan. There's no obstacle God can't deal with. But I also knew he loved unreached people, and he loved those humble, sweet people in the Gaza Strip who were so open to us. And we started going in and looking for ways to be a presence of Messiah among our neighbors. I didn't know a word of Arabic. All I knew was Hebrew at that point, and they still loved and accepted us. And that's where I heard about the Israeli doctor who was starting a program to bring kids for heart surgeries in Israel. And I called him up right away and said, what about all these kids in Gaza? Because based on the changing political realities there, so many kids are just being left to die kilometers away from these Israeli hospitals. Can we accept that reality? And the doctor said, no, those are exactly the kids I want to reach, but I can't get anyone in Gaza to talk to us. And that's where our calling as Gentile Christians, I think, came more into focus for me as well. What are we doing in Israel? What can we offer? Actually, there's a little link in the chain, but it's an essential one. I can go into Gaza and find these kids and get them out. And the Lord gave faith to basically, we promised to split the costs with the doctor for all these Gaza kids. And we didn't have anything, but the Lord had been showing, step out and trust me and do what I've told you to do, and I will provide for you. And it just started from there. This was 1996, and kids have been streaming out of Gaza into Israel for heart surgeries ever since. Just had a text before we started talking. Yeah, we'll take that urgent kid tomorrow. We'll bring him. So life and death cases, kids who will definitely die if the hospitals in Israel are not open to them. And the impact on the family is, once you see it, can't walk away from it. So here we are. How many years later? 29 years now.
Wow.
It says to these parents as well, somebody knows you, somebody notices you, you're not just passed by. Because, I should imagine in all the mayhem and chaos that's going on, especially in Gaza, that they must feel most forgotten. I want to go back to something you said much earlier, that it somehow is in the DNA of the Jewish people to be that light to the nations, to be there for them. And I can remember when we made a documentary out there, hearing about soldiers, the IDF, who would set up medical centres on the borders of these nations, so that people, if they could get there, they could help them. And stories of how, I think there was one, for example, where a child needed a bone marrow transplant. I think the mother had got through with them and the mother wasn't compatible. And the IDF sent some of their best soldiers undercover into that neighbouring dangerous country to find a compatible donor, and then got them out, risking their lives, risking their people, and got them out in order that they could be a donor for that child. Now, as far as I know, they were not believers. They were probably Orthodox. But like you said, there's something in the DNA that says we have to be a help. As we're recording now, they're one of the first teams to be in Turkey, which is their enemy, to help. So it's interesting, I find, that you are being in partnership and helping activate what God has already put in these people. Yeah. Would that be right?
It is, and they're the ones through whom God taught us about the value of every human life made in the image of God. And it was amazing what was happening up on the Syrian border, and which I think you're describing during the Syrian civil war in the earlier years. And somehow there were Christians in the mix there too, weren't there? They were the ones who were going across the border and setting up these clinics, and then the IDF was helping and bringing. So there's something in this physical reality that reflects the spiritual reality that he's making one new man out of the two, and tends to do something beautiful when we work together.
Yeah, before we move on more with your story, I'd like to put something else that you said that I think is hugely significant, that needs a light shining on it. You saw your role as a Gentile Christian, believer, whatever you like to call it. You saw your role that you could do something the Jewish people couldn't. And I think these days there is a tendency in some of the church, I'm choosing my words very carefully, to wish they were Jewish, to be Jewish, to take on the Jewish identity and somehow lose the fact that we are from the nations and that we are Gentile, and we have a significant role to play, but we need to own who we are and not just try and give it away. I can remember when we were in Jerusalem, we were doing a premiere of the documentary. And right at the end, as people were leaving, I got the mic and said, I've forgotten to tell you something. None of us are Jewish. None of us live in the land, not the film crew, not the young people, not us. We are Gentiles. We have no connection other than doing this with the land. And it was like the whole room stopped and they said, why would you do this?
So we assumed you were Jewish.
We assumed you were because there's a price to be paid for doing these things. We assumed you were. So
it's probably the beard as well. That probably.
Yeah. So I just wanted to draw attention to that you said, to encourage listeners who are from the nations, who are Gentiles, to lift up your heads, to own who we are, and to live who God intended us to be as one new man with the people of Israel. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly. Sometimes I say I'm a happy Gentile. I'm very happy to be a Gentile because of the freedom. I do believe in ongoing calling of the Jewish people. I believe that though we are united, there's still distinctions. Okay, there's no more Jew or Gentile, male or female, and then Paul, on the other hand, there's all kinds of distinctions within the life of the church between male and female, and between Jew and Gentile. We still carry these distinct callings, and as we've already described in the work we're seeing, each one is needed and essential, and couldn't be done without the other. This is God's design, and I'm very grateful to be exactly who God created me to be, because He's building up a house with both of us together, and it wouldn't exist without either one of us. So thank God for exactly who we are.
You mentioned about the surrounding nations and people coming from those places to come to Israel, and even the Jewish doctor who said that I would love to be able to help, but I've got no way of being able to make that connection. And people around the world, when they hear about Israel, they hear about the surrounding nations, they mostly just hear about the hostilities and the conflicts, the wars that go on, and they don't really hear so much about these kinds of situations. Is there an example of someone that you tried to help, but the people there were too scared, or they refused to accept the help from Israel, and so therefore nothing was done to help the child?
You mean in other countries in the Middle East where
Yeah, or in Gaza, where they said, no, there's no way we can accept this help from Israel. We're just not doing it.
I haven't had that problem in Gaza. The Gazans, their destiny is tied with Israel and has been for decades. So even with everything that's happened, they know if I can only get to Israel, I'm going to be taken care of. It's a dream. So
Wow.
I'll mention in passing as well that the IDF has always made it possible for those kids to come, even in the worst of times. So, you hear accusations sometimes of blockading and not allowing access to medical care. If it's a life and death case, there's never been a question in many, many years, many, many kids. They always facilitate this for us. So I need to bear witness to that. In other countries, there's a whole story. This started in Gaza, and then I was deported from Israel at one point, and my Reader's Digest credentials apparently ran out, and the Interior Ministry, rightfully guarding the Jewish nature of the state, and I'm a guest here, so no criticism. But at some point they said, "Yeah, you can't stay here anymore. You have to leave." And there were some secular Israelis who were ready to go to court to fight for me to continue. But I'm there in Ben Gurion Airport, and they're about to put me on a plane back to the U.S. and felt the Spirit of God very clearly say, "Don't fight this. Don't resist this." So I turned down this lovely, generous offer. They were about to go to the High Court with papers. But what was happening, from there I bounced back into Jordan for the first time, and I started looking a little bit beyond. I'd been very focused on the Gaza Strip, and then the second Gulf War broke out. Now we're in 2003, I think, and we were in a place where we were able to launch into Iraq after this war, and what's happening to our neighbors there? This was a whole different thing. There'd never been any contact between Iraq and Israel since the Iraqi Jews and the Kurdish Jews came here in 52 or something. Since then, absolute silence and enmity, no connection. And what I found there was similar to Gaza. All these kids are just dying. There's no heart surgeries going on. I didn't have faith for a while that they could come to Israel. So even facilitated some going to India and a few to the States. But then one day in the north of Iraq, there's a little video on our website if anybody wants the whole story. It was very beautifully captured in real time. But in brief, I'm visiting this American Army doctor. He's screening kids, and somebody lays a newborn baby on the desk in front of him. He gets out a battlefield sonogram device, puts it on her chest, says, "Oh, she's got transposition of the great arteries." And as he talks, he starts to cry and says, "I see kids like this all the time. She needs surgery in 2 weeks or she's not going to make it. And I don't have anywhere to send them." And I'm thinking of the doctors we work with in Israel. I say, I know they would take care of this baby if only it were possible that she could get to Israel. So here's the decision point. Do I say, "Too bad it's not possible," and close the door? Or do you say, "Let's pray and see what God can do"? And so the whole thing's on the video, but door after door incredibly opened. The cousin of Saddam Hussein, who was still hiding out somewhere at that point, gets on the phone with the Israeli doctor, and they're talking about, what are we going to do to save this baby? And see how it brings people together? It's incredible. And she made it to Israel. It was a huge international thing because it had never happened before. And since then, since 2003, now so many kids are coming from Iraq. To get back to your question, at first, we had good numbers from the south of Iraq, from Baghdad, from the Shiite areas. But then it got to be an issue. There was some opposition from religious scholars in Iraq who said this is forbidden for our enemy to be saving the lives of our children. And it went to the Iraqi parliament, and they were all giving speeches about how this has to be stopped. I saw a report on the Iraqi television which noted the irony of that. They said at the end of the report, yeah, it's why is it only our enemy is willing to save our children? And in response to that, our work in Baghdad dried up. But what's going on in the north of Iraq? Who are the Kurdish people? And why do they love Israel for some mysterious reason? And why are they so ready to come here? And so since 2003, we've learned a lot about the Kurds, and they're flowing in and out of Israel. And they're probably about half of the kids we do here are from the Kurdish region of northern Iraq now.
Wow.
Wow. So bring us up to date, Matt. When we started, you said, I'm in a new facility we've got up in Jerusalem. Can you give us a 2022-23 update on what is going on with you?
Sure. So the first years we were very close partners with the Save a Child's Heart organization that we mentioned. Wonderful partners. And over some time, their capacity was, meaning some kids were being turned away, their limited capacity. Since then, they've opened a big, beautiful new hospital, and they've increased their capacity. But we started working with the biggest hospital in Israel, Sheba Medical Center outside Tel Aviv. And they've been incredible partners. We talked about Israeli hospitals lowering the costs. So Sheba's taking more than half of the normal Israeli price on themselves. So we bring 40-something% for a child's life. Practical terms, that means for us, we can see a child's life saved for about $10,000. Is a child's life worth $10,000? And so and you know what? We've had kids. We had a child just go home last month after 300 days in the hospital there. And basically, the accountants don't like it, but basically, we still just pay the $10,000. So what is that, $30 a day for that child? It's miraculous that they and the doctors were fighting. We don't want to send this child away until she's well enough to go back to Gaza. So Sheba's been a beautiful partner, and Hadassah Hospital, historic Hadassah here in Jerusalem. You remember the War of Independence and how the convoy of Hadassah doctors and nurses were ambushed and massacred, and that's left a deep, deep, deep memory in the Jewish people. But Hadassah is very open to treating their neighbors' kids, and they've started accepting more and more kids. And in response, we've just rented this a new big building here. It's 4 stories to allow these mothers and kids to stay here very close to the hospital. We're hoping, God willing, our cooperation with them will grow. So we have a big house in Jerusalem and a very big house in Ashdod, which is mostly taking care of the families going to the Sheba Medical Center near Tel Aviv.
So are these houses predominantly for families who have their kids being treated? Is this also a place for aftercare? What do you do in your facilities?
Yeah, so the families come, and there's usually a week or 2 or 3 of testing and CTs and catheterizations before a surgery, and they don't need or want to be in the hospitals. So we need a place to care for them. And I will share this because this is really important to what's happening here is we're seeking to make these homes little communities of faith. So we have a team of volunteers from the nations, and we're doing life together. We're attempting to be a discipling community together. We're not just running around crazy all day getting kids to the hospitals, but we start every day with 2 hours of prayer and worship and reading the scriptures together, with the question always at the end of the day, what did we just hear that's going to change the way we live today? How do we become better disciples of the Messiah? And that's been a great experience, great opportunity to grow. I know this is close to the DNA of your ministry. And how do we transmit to the next generation the things that the Lord has been showing us? And how do we learn from them as well? So these aren't meetings where somebody's teaching and these young people are supposed to be taking notes. No, we're reading the scriptures and saying, Spirit of God, speak through this body. And I want to hear him speak through this 19-year-old into our lives as well. And we do experience that. So the Spirit of God is our teacher. And then we bring these Muslim families into that sort of community basis. And, we're very careful that they should never feel we brought them here for anything other than the healing of their child. But once they understand that and understand our hearts about that, we have total freedom to be who we are, which is followers of Jesus. And they see and understand that. And so we're all learning from each other as well. And I think it's eye-opening for all of us.
Yeah, it's really good to hear. I think this is really interesting, and there are lots of different things along the way that we could have dived into.
Very challenging too.
Yeah, really challenging. And I think for a lot of people as well who maybe they're not very aware of what happens in Israel, maybe they've never experienced it. Some of the stuff you've said is probably quite eye-opening in terms of how much they want to care for and look after people from surrounding nations. And I love that the work you're doing isn't just trying to care for people on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level. So Jonathan, thank you so much for coming and share about some of your background, but also the work you're doing. For people listening, if you're watching this, again, go check out the link, see the work that they're doing. Maybe you can contact them through the website, see how you can be supportive or get involved, maybe support, maybe even going out there and being a part of the care of the people in these facilities. So, Jonathan, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much.
Thank you for your interest, and call on us. We're not just looking for support. We want to give support to those who the Lord is calling to this land. You have friends here who will get behind you and pray with you and come and stay with us, whatever we can do. We feel very privileged to be allowed to serve here, and the Lord asks us to turn around and show the same kindness to others that he's shown to us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, if it inspired you, share it with others so we can see more people engaged in this community.